Ah, come on. I'm the one using the car. You? How about you walk home, huh? Starting the new year being bossed around, and now being told to walk home alone. The heartless man standing in front of me, embarrassingly, is my husband. And chuckling behind him? That's his mom and sister. You know the saying, like father, like son? Fits them perfectly. My name is Eleanor, and I'm 40 years old. I work part-time in an office. I live with my husband and daughter, Claire, who's in 8th grade. Raising a child goes by in a flash. It feels like just yesterday Claire was a little girl. She's going through a rebellious phase now, but she's a sweet girl who helps around the house when I'm not well. I met my husband, Daniel, at work. It was a typical office romance. Daniel's not exactly a whiz at his job, but he's calming to be around. Wrapped in his big arms, winters used to feel cozy. But over the years, he's become just plain stifling. The reason being, for heaven's sake, how long have you been doing housework for us? She hit me with the spatula she was holding. Hey, it makes me feel like I'm not joking around. I clenched my teeth and held back. Because the one attacking me is Daniel's mom, my mother-in-law. We've been at odds since we got married. In her traditional family, family gatherings happen frequently for holidays and ceremonies. Each time, mother-in-law would scold me. You're the wife of the eldest son, act like it. My problem isn't just my outdated mother-in-law. Hey, Eleanor. There's also my sister-in-law, who snacks on the fried chicken I prepared for everyone. Are you kidding me? I had a kilo of chicken. Is she a monster or what? I think it, but don't say it. My phone chirps with a notification. I glanced at it and couldn't stop laughing. What are you laughing at? Gross. Mom. Whenever I do something she doesn't like, she calls over my mother-in-law and I get scolded. That's how it's been at my in-laws' place. When I talk to friends, they say divorce is the only option. Of course, I've thought about it too. But Daniel, as unreliable as he is Claire's only father. I just have to endure a few family gatherings a year. Besides, it's not like I don't have any allies at these family events. My phone never stops buzzing during family nights. Hey, your phone keeps making noise. While stuffing his face, Daniel said this. By the way, he's on his 3rd serving of rice. Oh? Maybe it's notifications from Claire's class moms on social media. Ha, mom friends, huh? That must be tough. That was a lie. There is a moms group, but this is something else. After finishing my chores, I sat down on the sofa to read the accumulating messages. Hey everyone, thanks for making it through another day. God, it was so cold today, wasn't it? Tell me about it. Our place must be the only one that's cold both in summer and winter. Speaking of which, Eleanor was such a pain to deal with today again, huh? Reading through the group chat, I couldn't help but chuckle to myself. This chat group includes me and Daniel's cousins' wives. While my issues with my mother-in-law might be on the higher end, it turns out the other wives have their share of grievances too. We instantly clicked and became close. Initially, we vented over the phone, but ever since we all got smartphones and joined social media, we've taken to griping here. By the way, while chatting with my sister-in-law, I received a notification. Eleanor, heads up. Your sister-in-law's zipper is down. I couldn't contain my laughter. And yes, sister-in-law's zipper was wide open. I might not have been able to endure this on my own, but with these allies, it's probably one reason I haven't divorced yet. When I'm getting passive-aggressive comments from my mother-in-law and sister-in-law, Daniel just turns a blind eye. I once came home and tearfully said, Why didn't you stand up for me? I've been dealing with their snide comments all day. Daniel responded. You're overreacting. It's not a big deal, really. Be stronger. What's for dinner? He said it with such a dismissive look. The thought of divorce flashed through my mind, but our young daughter Claire adores Daniel. Daddy's belly is so soft and comfy. She'd say. I used to be like that too. I used to feel the same way about Daniel's big belly. I loved how he ate with such joy. But now, it just annoys me. I asked many times, why don't you lose weight? He always says, Claire likes my belly, and besides, obesity runs in my family. That's a lie. I've seen his relatives, only Daniel, his mom, and sister are obese. They're not just overweight, they're enormous, making rooms instantly feel smaller. Because of their massive size, the house is always freezing. In summer, the air conditioner is set to a chilly 64.4 degrees Fahrenheit. Feeling like we're in a freezer. In winter, as soon as sister-in-law complains, it's too hot, the heater gets turned off, and we all freeze. We all wear long sleeves even in the summer. But still, it's cold. Despite the cold, all three of them sweat profusely. Finally, a cold-sensitive relative shouted, Hey, what's the deal with this house? Why is it so cold? If you're going to complain, please leave. Mother-in-law responded, causing the room to empty out one by one. What era are they living in, talking about main and branch families? Of course, father-in-law would scold mother-in-law, but she would snap back. You're hardly ever home. Don't act like you're important. Sister-in-law joins in, and they both berate father-in-law, who ends up just letting it slide. I wished father-in-law would take a firmer stand, but the thought of being shoved aside by those large bodies sends shivers down my spine. My sister-in-law is over 40, single, and unemployed. Once upon a time, my sister-in-law, or sister-in-law, had a job. But she quit after finding out she was bullying a new employee who turned out to be the daughter of a major client. Now, she lives with her parents and doesn't work at all. She and her mom, my mother-in-law or mother-in-law, live off her dad's money. When I married into the family, sister-in-law had already been unemployed for many years. She does want to get married and often goes to matchmaking events. But as far as I know, she's never had a boyfriend. She says, I come from a good family, so my future husband needs to earn at least $80,000 a year. She used to say $100,000, so maybe she's lowering her standards. But let's be real, she needs a reality check. We should look more realistic. Sister-in-law claims she's from a good family because her dad, my father-in-law or father-in-law, owns a business. But the business was actually started by his dad, and it's been struggling under father-in-law's management. It seems that grandfather-in-law had a knack for business, but that talent didn't pass down to father-in-law. Ever since father-in-law took over, the company's performance has been on a steady decline. I know all this because I work at the same company. That's where I met Daniel, my husband, who also works there in a decent position. Many of Daniel's cousins work there too. My parents also own a small business. It's just them and a few relatives, but they're doing okay. They had me late in life and have always treated me like a treasure. Now they adore our daughter Claire, who prefers my parents over my in-laws. Mother-in-law doesn't seem to like that. Is Claire spending New Year's at your parents' again? Mother-in-law asks. Yeah. I reply. Daniel sighs and says, Don't you think that's weird? Normally, people spend New Year's with their paternal family. Then he says something unforgivable. Well, your parents are old. They don't have much time left. I said such a terrible thing. It's true, my parents are nearing 80, much older than Daniel's. Daniel's parents, who married young, are quite a bit older than him. But they're still spry and sharp as tacks. When I once asked them, "Isn't it time to enjoy your golden years? We just want to buy things Claire loves. Seeing you and Claire happy is our joy. Every time I visit home, Mom always gives me some money." Daniel laughed and belittled my precious parents. "What did you just say? Don't you know the difference between what's okay to say and what's not?" When I angrily retorted, Daniel said, "Fine, fine. I'm the bad guy, as always. If you're going to be like that, we might as well divorce." Then he stormed out of the house. The nerve of him. He better be prepared. The following year, on New Year's Day, my parents came to pick up Claire. "Take care, see you later," I said to them. Claire seemed happy to see my parents and said, "I'll let you know how it goes." Before leaving, it was refreshing to see Claire smile after a long time of her looking downcast. Even though my parents had come over, Daniel didn't even bother to greet them. What a rude guy. I felt utterly disrespected. After a while, Daniel came out of his room, and we headed to his parents' house. We haven't spoken since that incident. I don't understand why Daniel is mad, but I'm glad we're not talking. Lately, the only thing I've heard from him is, "Seconds, please." When I ignored him, he clicked his tongue and slammed the rice cooker shut. "Stop taking it out on objects," Claire chimed in. "Yeah, stop it." Only to be yelled at by Daniel. The atmosphere at home was terrible. As soon as we arrived at his parents' house, his mother-in-law, said, "Oh, Claire is with the other family again this year? What kind of upbringing is that?" Daniel quickly threw me under the bus. "It's Eleanor's poor parenting. Sorry, Mom. You can tell a lot about a person by their upbringing. Hurry up, we're busy with cleaning and preparing meals." This house felt as cold as ever. Upon entering the living room, I greeted the relatives gathered for the new year. Sister-in-law was there, and as expected, she ignored me. Despite the cold, seeing sister-in-law in a short-sleeve shirt and shorts gave me chills. When Daniel sat down, one of the daughters-in-law said, "Here you go," and carelessly served him tea. Everyone was on my side because Daniel had been discussing all his actions in a group chat. Father-in-law was out, so he wasn't there. "Seriously. We're all gathered here because Charles said he has something to discuss." Mother-in-law was getting impatient. While shivering and eating, a 5-year-old cousin said, "It's cold in here." She turned on the heater. The next moment, sister-in-law yelled, "Don't touch things in other people's homes, you brat." She snatched the remote from the child and turned off the heater. Naturally, the child was shocked and started crying. "If you're going to cry, why don't you go home?" A grown adult, over 40, said this to a 5-year-old. The relatives were furious. "Apologize to my daughter, you worthless woman. We've been putting up with this for the sake of the family, but this is the last straw. We're never coming back. You and your family can go to hell." Sister-in-law, who hadn't expected such a backlash, started crying despite her age. Honestly, everyone was disgusted. "Hey! Why is everyone blaming my daughter? Don't you feel ashamed? If anyone has a problem, leave." This time, mother-in-law started yelling. "This family is insane. We're cutting ties with you." One by one, the relatives said this and left. The only ones remaining were Daniel, mother-in-law, sister-in-law, and me. The room felt even colder with fewer people. As I was shivering from the cold, mother-in-law said, What are you standing around for? The cleaning and meals are done, so you should leave too. Excuse me? I said, we're spending time as a family, so you should go. Annoyed, mother-in-law told me to leave, so I was happy to oblige. The moment I picked up my car keys, Daniel said, No, I'm using the car. You can, walk home? Daniel was unbelievable. He must be trying to annoy me because he doesn't like my recent behavior. They were all watching me, expecting me to cry, with smug smiles on their faces. Why don't you guys walk for a change? Oh, but with those bodies, that might be impossible. I won't be coming back here either. Goodbye. What? I said it with a big smile. Daniel and the others were speechless, their faces turning red. They were always timid around people other than family. I should have done this sooner. I felt lighter, as if I'd grown wings, and even breathing felt easier. As I was about to leave, father-in-law returned with someone. Oh, Eleanor, where are you going? It's unusually quiet here, father-in-law said, and the person with him greeted me. Eleanor, long time no see. Saying that, he called out to me refreshingly. It was William, my former brother-in-law, who had recently become the company president. I am not married. He was single and had been working overseas. He looked handsome, much like father-in-law. It had been years since we last met. William, it's been a while. Mother-in-law told everyone to leave, so they did. She also told me to walk home, so I'm about to do that. I said it matter-of-factly. Upon hearing this, both men looked at Daniel and the others with disgust. Is this true? Father-in-law asked in a low voice. Mother-in-law tried to defend herself. Well, everyone was blaming her. Don't you find your daughter cute? Cute? This freeloader? She's just getting fatter. Are you all planning to become sumo wrestlers? I'd never seen father-in-law so angry in the many years I'd been married into this family. I wished he'd scolded these hopeless people sooner. I even felt resentful toward him. Well, it doesn't matter to me anymore. I'm leaving now. And just so you know, I'm divorcing you. Do whatever you want. I glared at Daniel as I said this. He glared back, clearly unhappy. Eleanor, I'll drive you. Get in the car. Father-in-law offered, but I declined. I'm fine. My ride is already here. I opened the front door to find my parents and Claire waiting to pick me up. I had decided today to tell Daniel about the divorce, and I had already talked to Claire about it. When I told Claire we were getting a divorce, she hugged me, tears in her eyes, and said, Really? Living with Dad has been so hard. He hugged me while shedding tears. Seeing Claire, Daniel desperately said, Claire, you'll live with Dad, right? You love Dad. Claire started crying and said, No way. After Dad takes a bath, there's hardly any hot water left. And he eats like a pig. Plus, Grandma said. After saying that, Claire burst into tears. Claire had told me various things when I informed her about the divorce. Grandma called me a failure. I couldn't believe it. That's not something a grandmother should say to her granddaughter. Mother-in-law looked guilty. And then this. Claire then showed me a photo of mother-in-law and sister-in-law shopping, their cart filled with meat and snacks. Some local overweight mom and kid are always blocking the aisles and being rude to the staff. So annoying. Those words were posted on social media by someone with no consideration. Claire's school caught wind of it. Thankfully, no one knew it was about her grandma and aunt, but the fear of being found out made every day stressful for her. Seeing Claire cry, Daniel finally seemed to grasp the gravity of the situation and fell sister-in-law. It was too late for realizations now. We're handing over the family business and moving to the countryside. We've always loved gardening, and we're looking forward to enjoying our retirement. Eleanor and Claire are coming with us, so it should be a happy time for all of us. When Dad shared this with the in-laws, "Moving?" Daniel's eyes widened in surprise. Of course, he was surprised. No one had told him anything. When we told our parents we were divorcing, Dad shared this plan with us. They had been thinking of moving back to the countryside where Mom grew up. They had already found a new home, and once they confirmed we were heading to the in-laws, they started moving our stuff. "I'm truly sorry." My father-in-law apologized. "Considering how Eleanor and Claire feel, we have no intention of forgiving you. Excuse us," Dad said, his eyes cold, and led us to the car. Later, I contacted my father-in-law to resign from my job. I had already discussed the divorce with a close colleague, so the transition was smooth. My father-in-law kept apologizing over the phone, but I cut him off, saying, "It's fine." I left the social media group with the other daughters-in-law as is. When I announced the finalized divorce, they all congratulated me and thanked me for my hard work over the years. Since the incident at the in-laws during New Year's, some had even improved their relationships with their mothers-in-law. I heard that little girl still occasionally cries, remembering what happened, but she's back to her old self and attending preschool. I'm truly relieved. As for my former in-laws, my father-in-law stepped down as the company president. The new president is my former brother-in-law, William. They gathered the family to announce this during New Year's. Daniel protested. "I'm the eldest son, you know." But Daniel had been taking liberties at work, leaving early and coming in late, all because he was the boss's son. It was exhausting to keep covering for him. His lackadaisical attitude towards work meant his department's performance was poor. Frustrated both at home and work, my former father-in-law consulted with my former brother-in-law. Turns out, he has some business acumen. The company's performance has been gradually improving. "Wait a minute. I never agreed to work." "Please use formal language at work, Zoe. I won't go easy on you just because we're family." My former mother-in-law and sister-in-law were told to earn their own living and started working at the company. Daniel was transferred, and all three were assigned to sales. Daniel, who had been so sure he'd be the next president, was demoted to a regular employee. For someone as prideful as him, this must be the ultimate humiliation. Honestly, it serves him right. It seems that he walks a lot every day and works desperately. According to a former relative who happened to see them, all three of them seem to have lost weight. Seems like it's been a good diet for them. Much better than staying cooped up at home. My former mother-in-law and sister-in-law, who used to be so close, are now constantly fighting, probably due to stress from work. I'll never forgive my former in-laws, but they've caused trouble for so many people. They should spend the rest of their lives making amends. As for us, we've moved to the countryside and are living peacefully. Claire, who was initially anxious about going to school, now says, "Mom, can I bring a friend home next time?" With a smile. I recovered to the point where I could say that with a smile. I was fortunate to find a full-time job quickly, so we're managing. My parents, who live with us, have rented a small plot of land and are busy growing various vegetables. The cucumbers we harvested this summer were delicious. I failed as a mother for not noticing Claire's pain. I intend to keep the lines of communication open with my family, holding the feeling of making amends to Claire in my heart. I plan to say what needs to be said and even have plenty of arguments. As a mother, I'm committed to cherishing my family from now on. Because I've been leading a self-indulgent life without looking after myself. Grace, the elderly woman I visited for home care, sighed as if she had known this was coming all along. The news had arrived that Grace's estranged son had passed away. Grace went back to her room and said, "Please, leave me alone for a while." I could faintly hear Grace sobbing inside the room, but I couldn't think of any words to comfort her. Having lost my son before, I knew from experience that no words of encouragement could touch the heart at such a time. I left a sandwich in front of her room and wrote a note saying, "Please eat a little, if you can." An hour later, Grace called me in. "Thank you for the sandwich. It was delicious." She had a bright face as if she had wiped away all her sadness. It seemed like she was putting on a brave face not to worry me. Grace, with her usual calm expression, said, "Chloe, I hate to ask, but could you go to the office and submit the death certificate for my son? It's hard to get around in a wheelchair." "Understood, I'll take care of it." Having lost my own son, Stephen, just a year ago, I was more than willing to help. After completing the paperwork without any issues, Grace called me in again and said, "Chloe, you have really taken good care of me this past year. Thank you. But you don't have to worry about me anymore. You can stop coming from tomorrow. Today will be your last day." I felt a darkness envelop me. How am I supposed to raise my young grandson William from now on? My name is Chloe, in my 60s. Once, in my 30s, I dated a man named Thomas, and we had a son together. "We'll build a wonderful family together, the three of us." That was my promise, but somewhere along the line, everything went wrong. As soon as Thomas and I got married, his once kind demeanor completely changed. He started to vent his frustrations on Stephen and me when work didn't go well. Complaints about dinner being late, the child's crying being annoying, and lashing out at us over any little thing that didn't go his way. At first, I tried to endure it, but Thomas's behavior only got worse day by day. His outbursts became so uncontrollable that not even my voice could reach him, and I too started to feel cornered. "Enough is enough. I can't follow you any further. It's one thing for me, but I don't want Stephen to suffer the consequences." Wanting to protect young Stephen from the fallout, at 40, I decided to divorce Thomas. "Do as you please. If you think you can survive on your own, then go ahead." I understood Thomas's warning, but my desire to escape the harsh reality was stronger, so I took young Stephen and left the house. Stephen was just 6 years old then, barely starting elementary school. After finding a small, affordable apartment and finishing the move, can I really raise Stephen to be a fine person on my own? I watched the setting sun and wondered. But seeing Stephen's carefree smile made all those worries dissipate like fog. "Stephen, from now on, it's just you and Mom, but we'll make it through." And I promised. Stephen would amusingly share various events from school, and I never felt the hardship. I started working part-time at a supermarket to support us, and when I came home tired, Stephen would run up to me and massage my shoulders. "Thank you always. Stephen, you're really thoughtful and kind." "It's nothing. It's because you always work so hard for me, Mom." His words would instantly lift all the fatigue of the day. However, living on a part-time income only increased my anxiety about the future. Thinking about Stephen's school fees and entrance exams, it was clear that things would get financially tighter. So, I decided to boldly step into the caregiving profession. With an aging society, the demand for caregivers would only grow, and if I could get the qualifications, I wouldn't have to worry about food on the table. Convinced of this, I worked as a caregiver while acquiring various related qualifications. Even as Stephen entered his sensitive teenage years, he grew into the same pure-hearted child and started part-time work in high school. I didn't want to overburden Stephen, who was preparing for exams, but he would smile and say, "This is for my own good. Part-time work is part of learning about society. It will surely help me when I look for a job later." After graduating from high school, Stephen got a job at a small local factory. Around this time, Stephen had a fateful encounter with a woman. She was an office clerk at the same company, Isabella, who was 2 years younger than Stephen. "It's nice to meet you. My name is Isabella, and I'm dating Steven. I was convinced that she would be a good match for Steven and blessed their relationship from the bottom of my heart. Moreover, Isabella was 4 months pregnant with Steven's child. I'm becoming a grandmother already. So I joked. Reflecting on my past, I had Steven in my mid-30s, which was close to being a late pregnancy. The childbirth and parenting were quite challenging, considering they were still in their 20s. If you ever have any trouble, feel free to consult me. I won't hesitate to help in any way I can. I offered my support to the young couple, hoping they wouldn't have to endure the hardships I did. Thank you so much, Chloe. Isabella came to cherish me like her own mom. Especially since she had lost her parents just before her marriage, a time when she felt very vulnerable. Soon after getting married, Steven and Isabella rented an affordable apartment nearby. Half a year later, Isabella gave birth to a healthy boy. They named him William. William, it's your grandmother. Nice to meet you. I couldn't help but smile as I looked at William. I wonder who he resembles. Does he have Steven's nose? It's too early to tell, Steven said with a wry smile next to me, and the nurse laughed amusingly. Following the birth, Isabella decided to quit her job and focus on raising her child. I can't be left behind. Wanting to support Isabella in any way, I spent my savings on baby supplies. Isabella was astonished when she returned home from the hospital. Wow, Chloe. When did you manage all this? She was so touched that she started laughing at the entrance. Steven commented with an amused voice. It seems like you're going to spoil the grandchild. I didn't mind what anyone said. Of course, Steven's child would be dear to me. Isabella, if you ever have trouble with childcare, call me anytime. I'll come running, I said earnestly, but Steven coolly retorted. You just want to see William, don't you, Mom? Caught me. I could only respond with a wry smile. When William turned 3 and began to walk and talk on his own, Isabella started working part-time to support the family. During weekdays, she would leave William at a childcare center and pick him up in the evening after her part-time job. To lighten her load, I eagerly took on the role of babysitting William on weekends. As I played horseback rides with William on my back. Don't get too carried away. You're not young anymore, you might hurt your back. Don't treat me like an old lady. I still feel young at heart. I need you to stay healthy for me, Mom. At least until William grows up and gets married. Steven's roundabout way of showing care deeply touched me, despite my aging body. 5 years had passed since Steven and Isabella's marriage. One day, Steven approached me with an unusual seriousness. Mom, there's something I want to ask of you. Never having asked for anything from his parents before, Steven's request made me nervous. What's with the formal request? We've been married for 5 years now, and we thought it might be nice to go on a trip just the two of us, to relax for a bit. Relieved by his explanation, I responded. So you're asking me to look after William while you're gone? Is that it? Would that be okay? You've finally become a bit more childlike. You never used to rely on your parents. Hey, I'm 27 years old now. Calling a 27-year-old adult childlike is a bit much. Although Steven complained with a strong tone, his expression was smiling. Sure, go on your trip. Take your time and enjoy yourselves. Thank you, Mom. I'll make it up to you someday. With those words, Steven and Isabella rented a car and went on their trip. However, I couldn't shake off a sense of unease that I couldn't explain. What is this anxiety? I hope nothing happens. That day, I had the day off from my caregiving job, so I could spend the whole day with William. I remembered that we had an old deck of cards in the back of the closet that I bought for Steven a long time ago. How about we play some cards? I want to play. William eagerly raised his hand in response. William quickly learned the rules of the game. You're so smart, William. You picked it up right away. It's boring to play alone. I want to play with Dad and Mom next time. By 9 p.m., even the energetic William had tired himself out and dozed off on the couch. You'll catch a cold sleeping there, I said as I picked him up and carried him to the futon in the bedroom. When did William get so heavy? I used to be able to lift him so easily. I was reminded once again of how quickly children grow. Just as Stephen said before they left, I have to live a long life, at least until William grows up and gets married. Thinking this, I gazed at William's face, now peaceful and asleep in my arms, wishing for this happiness to last forever. Then, suddenly, the phone rang. It was unusual for anyone to call me at 9 p.m. A bad premonition ran through my mind. Tentatively, I picked up the receiver, and it was from an unfamiliar regional hospital. The person on the other end spoke in a calm tone, methodically explaining the situation, but each word felt like a curse, darkening my vision. "Excuse me, what are you saying?" "Stephen and Isabella are both in critical condition, unconscious. It's a dangerous situation that requires immediate attention." "What's wrong, Grandma?" William, sensing something unsettling in my somber expression, looked up at me worriedly. "William, let's get changed quickly." After hurriedly dressing a sleepy William, without caring what I was wearing, I asked a neighbor to drive us to the hospital where Stephen and his wife were taken. Upon arriving at the hospital and walking down the dimly lit corridor of the emergency department, "This way." The nurse led us to the ICU. Both were in the intensive care unit, motionless with tubes inserted in their mouths. "Stephen! Stephen!" No matter how much I called out, Stephen didn't respond, just like a doll. "Mom! Mom!" William also repeatedly called for his mom, but the response was the same. Eventually, without regaining consciousness, both their heartbeats stopped, and a moment of silence fell in the ICU. Breaking the silence, "Stephen!" I shouted the name of my beloved Stephen. In the end, both of them didn't make it. After calming down a bit, the local police hesitantly explained the situation of the accident. Unable to respond properly to a car driving the wrong way, this was the result. Their words swirled in my head, causing confusion. That night, Stephen appeared in my dreams smiling and waving at me. I was incredibly angry. "You idiot. You told me to live a long life until William gets married, and what about you? Why did you have to go before me?" I yelled at him over and over. I wanted to run to Stephen and hug him tightly, but his intangible body slipped through my arms. Eventually, Stephen took Isabella's hand and walked into the light, heading towards heaven. "You two are really foolish." When I woke up, my cheeks were wet with tears. William gently wiped them away with his hand. "Don't cry, Grandma." Being comforted by William, how foolish I am. I can't stay down forever. "William, Dad and Mom are gone, but from now on, it's just you and me. Let's live our lives together, supporting each other. I still have things I must do. For the sake of raising the only family I have left, William, I switched to a better-paying home care job. I was dispatched through a referral to the mansion of an elderly woman in her late 80s named Grace Smith. She seemed to be quite wealthy as the mansion was spacious, but Grace was living there all by herself. I wonder what I'll do if she's difficult to deal with. The world she lives in seemed so different from mine, it was overwhelming. Even before entering, my anxiety only grew. But I can't afford to complain when it's all for William. I chided myself for wanting to whine. The mansion was too large for one person to live in, especially since Grace had been living in a wheelchair for many years. I sympathized with Grace, thinking how hard it must be to move around such a large house. The pathway leading to the entrance had a gentle slope and handrails installed. As expected of a wealthy person, the accessibility features were impressive. When I rang the doorbell and introduced myself as a caregiver, a dignified elderly lady greeted me with a warm smile. "Welcome. I am the owner of this house, Grace Smith." "Nice to meet you, I'm Chloe. Your garden flowers are beautiful." I complimented the splendidly blooming flowers in the flower bed as a greeting. I was advised by a senior caregiver that it would be good to start the conversation from there, assuming she had a strong interest in flowers. As I hoped, Grace's face softened even more with a gentle and kind expression. "Oh, I'm delighted to hear such words from someone as young as you." Although I felt a bit resistant to being called young, I graciously thanked her. Grace was never arrogant. She treated me rather like a family member, which made me feel at ease. "From the first time we met, I didn't feel like you were a stranger. I wonder why. Is it because of your name?" "My name, Chloe?" "Long ago, it was the name of a woman who had a connection to me." Sorry for the unnecessary story. No, it's fine. Then, as we spent time drinking coffee, we gradually started to share stories about our lives every day. Grace's husband had passed away from an illness a few years ago, and she had been living alone in a wheelchair since. Do you have any other family? Grace looked sad as she responded. I do have a son, but he only comes by when he's short on money. It's boring to talk about this with you. I didn't know how to respond, so I just smiled awkwardly. What about your family, Chloe? I had a son, but he recently passed away in an accident. That's terribly sad. There's no greater sorrow than losing a child. Grace squeezed my hand gently to comfort me. Fortunately, I was blessed with a grandson, William. He's a 5-year-old boy, quite mischievous, but he's the reason I can find the strength to keep living. That's wonderful. Having someone precious to protect is a beautiful thing. It becomes a reason to live. Grace also said, if you'd like, bring him over sometime. It must be lonely for him to stay at home alone. Taking her up on her offer, I brought William over the next weekend. Upon seeing William, Grace narrowed her eyes. Oh, this child is... and tilted her head. Is there something about William? Grace laughed off in haste. No, nothing at all, dear. It's just that, as one ages, everything seems to remind one of the past. I was curious about Grace's remark, but she didn't seem inclined to elaborate. What's your name? William. Nice to meet you. How admirable. What's your dad's name? Stephen. And your grandfather's name? William, looking puzzled, shook his head and then looked at me. William didn't know anything about his grandfather, and I had never told him anything, so he couldn't answer. I'm sorry, Grace. I've never talked to him about his grandfather. Grace smiled. I'm sorry for asking such strange questions, she said, gently patting William's head. A year after I started caring for Grace, news arrived that Grace's estranged son had passed away. Because I've been leading a self-indulgent life without looking after myself, Grace murmured with a sigh, as if she had known this was going to happen from the start. But when she returned to her room, please, leave me alone for a while. I could faintly hear Grace sobbing inside, but I couldn't think of any words of comfort to offer. Having lost my son before, I knew from experience that no words of encouragement could reach the heart at such a time. I left a sandwich in front of her room. Please eat a little, if you can. And wrote a note saying, an hour later, Grace called me in. Thank you for the sandwich. It was delicious. She had a face as if she had wiped away all her sorrow. It seemed like she was trying not to worry me. Grace, with her usual calm expression, said, Chloe, I hate to ask, but could you go to the office and submit the death certificate for my son? It's hard to get around with these legs. Understood, I'll take care of it. Having lost Stephen just a year ago, I readily agreed to help. Several documents were needed to submit the death certificate. When I went to the office reception to prepare each document, I discovered an unexpected truth. The deceased son's name was listed as Thomas Smith, a name I couldn't possibly forget, the name of the man I once loved, Stephen's dad and William's grandfather. How could this? How could this? Learning this shocking truth, I suddenly cried at the reception, bewildering the staff. Are you all right? Can we help you? Trying to appear calm, I ended up with a forced, awkward smile. Struggling to stand up straight, my vision blurred, and I fainted. When I regained consciousness, I was lying on a bed in the office's medical room. I'm sorry for the trouble. Thank you. I hastily got up, overwhelmed by apology and embarrassment. Please, don't overdo it. It's tough losing a loved one. I thanked the staff repeatedly, gathered my things, and immediately returned to Grace's house. Seeing me burst in, Grace looked startled. Chloe, what's happened to you? You look so scared. I glanced at my reflection in the mirror. Despite not being angry, my expression could easily be mistaken for fury. Grace, your son's name was Thomas Smith, wasn't it? Yes, that's right. What about it? I swallowed hard, then took a deep breath before replying. Thomas Smith was my ex-husband. Oh. Grace let out a gasp of shock upon learning this fact. So, Chloe was really you. Tears began to well up in Grace's eyes. She then shared a truth she had kept hidden in her heart. Thomas had clashed with his wealthy father and left home right after dropping out of college. Since then, he had been estranged from his family, only starting to visit his mother after his father passed away. During that time, Thomas and I met and I became pregnant with our first son, Stephen. But when I suggested that Thomas should at least greet his parents, "There's no need. I'm not showing my face at that man's place," he stubbornly refused, so I couldn't say anything more. As a result, I never met my in-laws before divorcing Thomas. Grace mentioned she had suspected when she heard the name Chloe, as I had returned to my maiden name, but she wasn't sure. I also hadn't imagined that Smith, a common surname, could be my ex-husband's family. After completing the death certificate without any issues, Grace called me again. "Chloe, you've really helped me a lot over this past year. Thank you. But you don't have to come from tomorrow. Today will be your last day." The sudden notice of termination made me feel as if the ground had disappeared beneath me. How was I going to raise young William now? Sensing my unease, Grace smiled kindly as usual. "Oh dear, please don't misunderstand. I'm not saying this because I've come to dislike you." I tried desperately to understand Grace's true intentions. "It might be presumptuous to ask, but if you're willing, Chloe, would you consider living with me? William too, of course." Tears welled up in my eyes as I finally grasped Grace's intent. "I don't mind, but are you sure?" "Good or bad, you're family. And family should live together." "Hey William, do you remember the grandma we met before?" "Yeah, I remember. Grandma Grace was very kind." "That grandma is your grandfather's mom, your great-grandma." William tilted his head, seemingly puzzled by the concept of a great-grandma. "Grandma Grace said she'd like us to live with her, the three of us. What do you think?" Without hesitation, William exclaimed, "Yay! I love that grandma too." And so, William and I began our new life living with Grace in her mansion. As William grew, he began to resemble Stephen more and more. "William is getting so big. Watching him reminds me of Thomas as a child," Grace said, watching William with a loving gaze. "Grandma Grace, let's play cards together." "Let's do that. We can eat some cookies too." Perhaps it's the blood connection, but William has grown quite fond of Grace. With this strong family bond, I felt confident going out to my home care visits, knowing William was in good hands. To ensure I see William's happiness with my own eyes, I knew I had to stay healthy. On the anniversaries of Stephen and Isabella's passing, Grace, William, and I would visit their graves. "Stephen, Isabella, William is doing well in school. He even won first place in a marathon recently. Isn't that great?" And then, "I wish I could have met Stephen while he was still alive," Grace said, standing beside me. The cemetery has become more accessible nowadays, with elevators installed throughout. Thanks to this, Grace could visit more easily in her wheelchair. "Now, it's Thomas's turn." "Chloe, are you sure?" I squeezed Grace's hand. "Thomas is an important family member who brought us all together. Without him, Stephen and William wouldn't have been born," I said, patting William on the head. "I know it might be selfish of me, but if you're okay with it, Grace, could we have Stephen and Isabella's remains moved to the Smith family grave?" "Of course. We're family, after all." A chill seemed to pass through us as the wind blew. "Aren't you cold?" William moved closer to Grace, holding her hand. "Your hand is warm." "And your body is warm too." As we headed towards Thomas's grave, I pushed Grace's wheelchair forward.